Buddy, I just want the record to reflect that it's 10:59 a.m. Pizza Ranch in Cooperstown, Griggs County, for the review of the Griggs County Sales, Market, and Productivity Study for the taxable year 2016. This hearing is authorized under North Dakota Century Code 570107. I'm Ryan Rauschenberger. I'm the tax commissioner and will serve as the hearing officer on this matter today. If you can, please silence all of your cell phones. And also, if you can, if you have a chance to speak or want to speak or want to address myself, please make sure that you speak loudly and clearly. We do have a recording for minutes today, and also make sure you're not talking over one another, and I'll make sure to call on you so you have a chance to make comments. The sales ratio study and data are used by local assessors, county directors of tax equalization, and city, township, county, and state boards of equalization to assist in equalizing assessments of property in the state and throughout the state. Sales information is required to be delivered to the state supervisor of assessments by March 31st, 2017. Because the 2016 sales information has not been provided by Griggs County, we're here today to give Griggs County Commission the opportunity to present and review its data. Well, I'd like to ask now, before we proceed, is there a designated spokesperson from the County Commission, or would you like to speak individually, or will there be a designee that'd like to speak on behalf of the Commission?
Well, I don't think that we can speak on behalf of the Commission because we haven't had time to sit down and that would be against the open meeting rules and regulations. So it's going to have to be, anybody speaking is going to have to be their own opinion. It can't be on behalf of the Commission.
Excuse me, John, would you please make sure to identify yourself when you speak? So
okay, and I forgot to mention that too for the recording. Please identify yourself.
John Wakefield.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you'd like to speak or address myself, please just raise your hand or indicate, and I'll make sure to call on you. And also, if there are any responses, make sure that they're verbal and not just a head nod or wave of the hand. So we make sure that gets on the record too, because of the audio recording. This time, I'd like to go around the room and have everybody introduce themselves and also state your title if appropriate. So I'll just start to my right here. Joe Morissette, Deputy Tax Commissioner.
Linda Ledbetter, State Supervisor of Assessments.
Dennis Alverson, I was a prior commissioner here for Griggs County.
Samantha Larson, I'm the auditor. Kelly Vincent, I'm the recorder, clerk of court for Griggs County.
Joanne White, resident of Cooperstown.
Paul Painter, Mayor, Cooperstown.
Weldon Cochran, Cooperstown City Council.
Don Biggessaw, State Representative, District 23.
Devon Lars, citizen, Cooperstown.
Reggie Devlin.
Bill Devlin, District 23, legislator.
Nancy Levy, Cooperstown City Auditor.
Chris Olson, I'm the Deputy City Auditor for Cooperstown.
Daniel Rouse, Legal Counsel to the North Dakota Office of State Tax Commissioner and Special Assistant Attorney General.
Charles Mindy, Special Assistant Attorney General, Legal Counsel.
Anita Wald, General Counsel and Special Assistant Attorney General.
And if the Commission could please.
John Wakefield, County Commissioner.
Sean Steffen, County Commissioner.
Troy Olson, County Commissioner.
Dale Peterson, County Commissioner.
Ron Dahl, County Commissioner.
Thank you for everybody in attendance and the County Commission for being here. In the notice of hearing, the Griggs County Commission was directed to present its sales, market, and productivity study and underlying data used to complete the study for the tax year 2016 at this hearing for the purpose of equalization for the sales ratio study, Have you brought your 2016 sales, market, and productivity study and the underlying data with you today? And at this point, any of the commissioners could respond to that on their own behalf.
Ron?
No. I don't know if you want me to address it, but pretty much I was working on it some, but we don't have the reports that I think we should have gotten from the recorder designating whether the sales were usable or not usable. So I was no longer working on it.
You guys get the monthly reports from our recorder, correct?
I'll refer to Linda Ledbetter as far as some of the procedural questions.
The report that the tax commissioner's office receives from the county recorder is a summary document that identifies that there were a certain number of deeds recorded, but we do not receive those actual documents. Those BX forms are provided to the county tax director's office. So we receive the summary document identifying the number of documents that were recorded.
We have not received that information.
At this time, I guess my understanding is that it has not been provided, it has not been uploaded in any form or provided to the state as is required by law, and is a requirement of the state supervisor of assessment to receive that data from every county for the purpose of making sure that sales and property values are equalized and making sure that they represent market value. We have not received that data, and at this point, this hearing is for the purpose of determining, are we going to receive the data or not? And I want it to be clear for the record that whether we will receive the data or not. What I'm hearing is no. We've asked for the data to be presented today, and what I'm hearing is that we will not be receiving that data.
We don't have it.
Let me address this. 1118.02.2, it's the recorder's duties. And the recorder is to supply the BX reports. At the time a deed is filed, the recorder is to determine whether or not that deed, the value can be a usable value in the process of producing the sales for Griggs County. We have addressed and asked the recorder on numerous occasions to verify whether or not these are usable sales or unusable sales. As recently as June 9th. And her response was that she was not going to classify a sale as usable or unusable because she didn't have the data available to do so. Now, if you'll read the Century Code, that's not according to the Century Code. The Century Code says a deed can't be registered unless it complies with one of two statements. The first statement is, on the face of the deed, full consideration paid for the property. If full consideration is paid for the property and is recorded in the deed, that is then considered a usable sale. The second consideration is a statement designating one of the exemptions in subsection 6, which the grantee believes applies to the transaction, which would then render that sale unusable in the BX study. What do you mean shaking your head? I'm reading it right here, Linda. I'm reading it right from Century Code. Right here. So then the BX report also gives a line where you have to verify, the recorder is to verify whether or not the sale is usable or unusable. That line has always been left blank. So first of all, we don't have a director, a tax director. We can't find one. We can't hire one. No one applies to our ads. We can't, short of going out and taking someone off the street and sentencing them to be a tax director, we don't have the ability to have one. So the county commission has accepted the interim duties of a tax director to the point that we can be the tax director. We've been told flat out we can't be the tax director, but someone's got to try and do some of this stuff. Without the cooperation of the elected officials in Griggs County, we have no way to compile this information. So we have no usable sales because the BX report on the line that says, is this usable or not, has never been filled out. What are we to do? If you don't have a usable sale, you cannot move forward with any of the information that you want. So and now this has been ongoing for 10 months. And we've been told by many, many people, including the elected officials, that they are elected officials, and we have no authority to compel them to do anything. The authority to compel them to do something lies with you. These are your forms. right? In the Century Code, your forms to the tax director, and unless you compel the recorder to supply us with the information, we cannot supply it to you.
I'd like to defer to Linda as far as the comments made, the information from the recorder and that actual process and how that works.
And also, this is Linda then, and also possibly to involve the legal counsel, of course, to do an interpretation of the statute to make certain that, I'm not leaving something out. So please interrupt at any point if you're hearing something that I should say differently. What I think is being interpreted by the Commission under 11-1802.2 are two separate processes than what we're talking about with the BX. The statement of full consideration and the idea of what is required for a recorder to be able to actually file a deed is identifying what information must be on that deed in order to allow them to record it. That does not validate the sales as it is used to determine a market sales study. That validates that it has provided enough information on that deed in order to have it recorded as a valid document that will transfer property between owners, that will have that record title information shared. But what the information then that would be completed by the tax director is based on their knowledge of assessments and what becomes an arm's length transaction. If an assessor or if someone who is educated in the assessment side of it has an understanding of what things make a arm's length transaction, just recording a dollar amount on a deed does not make it a deed that you would use as a sales study. If I were selling a piece of property to my son for a reduced price that is saying it is from family to family, that is not a true market price, because I could sell it to someone who sees a for sale sign in my yard, and as a willing buyer and a willing seller are willing to agree upon a certain price, that is going to most often be a different price than would be considered the dollar amount between me or a family.
That's all spelled out in this section of the Century Code, Linda. It's the same thing.
Maybe for clarification, so everybody's on the same page, maybe we should just read this short portion of the Century Code to clarify this. This is 11-1802.2, statements of full consideration to be filed with the recorder, procedure and penalty. Paragraph 1, any grantee or grantee's authorized agent who presents a deed in the office of the county recorder shall certify on the face of the deed one of the following: A, a statement of full consideration paid for the property conveyed; B, a statement designating one of the exemptions in subsection 6 which the grantee believes applies in the transaction. Now, if you go down to paragraph 3, in the same section, the recorder may not record any deed unless the deed complies with subsection 1, or record any affidavit of fixation unless the affidavit complies with subsection 2. So unless on the face of that deed it says the full value or lists a reason that it is exempted, that deed should not have been recorded. And then the BX report, by the way, the BX report is the recorder's BX report supplied to the recorder by your office, has a line on the report that says whether or not this property is usable. And we don't have any usable properties because that has been intentionally left blank, and according to our recorder's interpretation of it, she doesn't have the ability to determine whether or not that property is usable. Now, the Century Code says opposite of that. It also says in subsection 7 that somebody presenting a deed is guilty of a Class B misdemeanor if they falsify the information given to the recorder. So this is flat out. We will comply, but we have to have the information to comply, and we cannot make that determination. The determination whether or not that property is exempt or not has to come from the face-to-face interaction between the grantee and the recorder. Plain and simple. And so we could go through and we could guess. We could say, well, maybe this complies here, and maybe it doesn't here, but that's not the way it's supposed to work. So this isn't a matter of us being obstinate or trying to buck the rules. This is a matter of us trying to obey the rules. And in order to obey the rules, we have to have the information necessary from the onset, and we cannot compel that information out of somebody. We don't have the ability to do that. You have the ability to do that. In 2832 in the Administrative Code, you have the ability to compel the recorder to supply those forms, and that's it. So the purpose of this meeting, I think, is going to be that someone steps in and says, here's the information that the county commission or the tax director needs. Someone has to supply it to us.
And I might just add paragraph 4 under that same thing, that same section. It says the State Board of Equalization shall prescribe the necessary forms for the statements and reports to be used in carrying out this section. And the forms must contain a space for the explanation of special circumstances that may have contributed to the amount of the consideration. Now the Schedule BX, I have an example of one right here. It says right at the top of it, report of the county recorder, Schedule BX. And then on the back of the report, it's a place for it to be signed. And we don't have any of those Schedule BXs signed by the recorder.
Oh, defer to Linda. I guess I have a question for the record too. Is this something that we have seen before, or is something that is common that we have this conflict between the county commission and the recorder and inavailability, not having information available? Or is this something that's been addressed before?
No, we haven't had it addressed before, and the form begins with the county recorder's office because they are the ones that have the deeds that are filed with them. Again, the interpretation of the usable sales would be completed by someone who is determining that assessment question. And there are still things on the back of that BX form that identify whether they are usable or not usable that do not pertain to this section of statute. There are properties that are sold that they're going to have a selling price. They are farm exempt because I was a farmer, and at the time I sold my home, I was a farmer, my house was exempted. So that is going to be a different sales price on there. The price is not going to be reflected in the assessment book. So there are more things that are identified in statute that are addressed in what you're using to determine the validity of a sale for the sales ratio study. So there are other considerations rather than just looking at the statement of full consideration that's provided.
But that without usable sales, you can't go forward with the study. And we have 0 usable sales. The usable sales is determined, first of all, from that interaction between the grantee and the recorder. That is where it starts, and that's where it ends. Because the deed cannot be recorded unless the recorder is sure of the status of that property. It's right in the Century Code. So if there is not a true and full value put there, and if there's not an exemption, the deed is not supposed to be recorded. There's plain and simple. So the recorder has the information necessary at the time she records the deed. All she has to do is say, yes, this is a usable transaction, and this process goes forward. Without that, this process doesn't go forward. Again, we have her on record June 9th asking her just that exact question. Will you fill that out? She said, no, I don't have the information necessary to fill that out. Well, if she doesn't have the information necessary to fill it out, who else does?
And
it's plain and simple.
After this, Troy, okay, so the document's recorded, the transaction is complete. How then does somebody else pick that list up 10 months later and go compel that grantee to give you that information? They might not even be in North Dakota. I mean, that's craziness. The Century Code spells out this process in a rational chain of events, and if you're not going to do it that way, it gets terribly cumbersome. That's when you have the opportunity. They have to provide you with that information for this transaction to be completed. Once that's done, you've let the cat out of the bag. Now what are you going to do? Go chase those people down later?
Right. So I'm standing in front of you, John Wakefield. I'm standing in front of you, and I'm trying to record a deed. And the recorder is supposed to say, is this the full consideration listed here? Is that what's paid for it? And do any of the exemptions apply? And the fact that they put the full consideration and no exemptions moves that forward to make it a usable sale. An exemption makes it an unusable sale. It's straightforward. And if I am in front of you and I don't supply you with information, the recorder is supposed to say I cannot record that deed. That's what the Century Code spells out. So what are we to do? We can only comply with what is written and what the rules are in front of us. give us the full BX report and give us the usable properties and we comply with what you want. But you can't make us second guess and judge whether or not that property is usable when there's a process in place to determine that.
I'll ask Linda, as far as compliance goes, what would we need at this point for the county to be in compliance with sales ratio?
We haven't received anything at this point. I believe from the county treasurer, I received an email earlier this week or at the end of last week identifying that she would be providing the supplemental abstract and the abstract of assessments following her vacation. So those are links that are part of the process, but we would be needing a sales ratio study to determine the assessment level if they're within tolerance.
Right.
Those reports are filed.
But as far as the data available, we still need to have a study regardless of what data is available or in.
We would need a report of the market for 2016, correct?
I think moving forward, Linda, we need to determine if there is a way for compliance from the county at this point, as far as what needs to be met for there to be compliance or not. And I guess I'll let you decide what we would actually need, if it's an actual BX filled out and filed with the state, or what we would need at this point.
We would need a compilation of all the BX and the documents that were recorded for the year 2016, the determination of whether they are valid sales or not for us to be able to use them in the study. We would have to have those in order to determine a median for the sales ratio to apply to the current year's values.
But we don't complete the sales ratio study, you do. John Wakefield.
The study, in essence, by providing those documents that identify what the sale price is compared to the value in your assessment books, the study, the math completes itself. We compile it so it gives you the end result. Many counties do, have their own programs so they can track it, so they use that to manage their assessments throughout the year. But yes, once that information is within our system, as soon as that information is uploaded, it generates a distribution and an overall report for your county.
No, just to be clear, you said prior to that you would require a sales ratio study from the county. Now who? Let's be clear. Who does the sales ratio study?
And if I may, I'll cite 570105 sub 4. The county directors of tax equalization or city assessors shall compile a record of sales of property made in the county or city and in conjunction with the board of county commissioners shall analyze the sales for the purpose of advising the state supervisor of assessments as to the value of using the sales in any such study. The compilations must be forwarded to the state supervisor of assessments with the finding of the county director of tax equalization, which you have said you are acting in that capacity, city assessors, and the board of county commissioners.
Okay, so then under that, then the state does the sales ratio study, correct?
We receive the information that, like Linda said, is essentially the data comes from the county. The sales data and everything has to come from the county.
Well, maybe I better clarify it. This comes from your sales ratio study on the website. It says this 2016 assessment sales ratio study has been conducted according to the provisions of North Dakota Century Code 570105 through 570107 by the Property Tax Division of the Office of the State Tax Commissioner under the supervision of the State Supervisor of Assessments. Nowhere in there does it say it's done by the county. And all I can do is,
it is done by the
well,
county.
then why is this on your website? This is right off your website.
We get the information and we bring it all together and we have to present it to the board.
Right.
But the data comes from the county, and I want everybody here to know that.
The BX report is the data you need.
We need reports from the county.
Yeah, that's right. The BX report is the data you need. And that's what's always been provided before. So if we can get the BX reports, this meeting is over. We just need somebody to compel the recorder to give us a completed BX report, and we can comply. That will solve the city's problem. That will solve everybody's problem.
Kelly Vincent, Griggs County Recorder. I am 100%, I just want to state for the record that I am 100% in compliance with the North Dakota Century Code that is required of the Recorder's Office. Every month I do forward the report that is to be sent to, I believe it was Judy Gross before who received the court sales ratio report. As of January 2017, we were given a new format. These, Ron, could I look at your paperwork there?
The old one?
Yeah, this was the old form that was used. And there are certain numbers on here that we are required by the state to make sure that are filled out. The rest of this information is not information that is available to the county recorder. And also with the new format, the new Excel format that we received by the state. And it shows certain numbers that are required by the recorder. And those numbers I have provided to the county commissioners. Actually, I provided to Ron, and I've also provided that to Connie Esslinger, who was an intern doing the work of some of the work of the tax director. So each month I have forwarded that on. The numbers that were not filled out, including number 26 is transaction available to be used in the sales ratio. That is not something that is required from the state to be filled out by the county recorder. So that's why I have not filled out that as
According to the Century Code, it is.
No, according to the North Dakota Century Code, when a document comes into my office to be recorded, it must have a statement on there whether it has one of these, A, B, or C. If it doesn't have that, I can't record it. But that's not for me then to turn around and say, yes, this is usable on the sale. I just cannot record that document if it's not provided. So I just want to state for the record that I have been in compliance with what's required of me in the North Dakota Century Code. And this was just brought to my attention maybe a month ago. Ron Dahl was working on the sales ratio and at that point in time had ceased from doing that, and it then was directed towards me that I was not in compliance.
Ron, yeah, that is correct. You know, I still maintain that the Schedule BX, it says report of the county recorder, and there's a place for a signature on the back of that form. So that signature obviously is the recorder's signature. I wasn't getting that, and so I was unable to continue working on it.
On the front of the forms that is sent to the state, it compiles the number that have the full consideration or that are exempt. At the bottom of that, or what's supposed to be attached to that is the BX form. On the bottom of that first form, there is a spot that form is to be filled out, and there's a place on the bottom that is to be signed by the tax equalization director, not the recorder.
I disagree with that. I disagree completely.
I apologize, I don't have the form with me, but I don't know if you're able to pull that form up.
It's a 2-page form. It says it's the report of the county recorder.
No, that's the form, but the report that goes with that you also get a copy of each month.
Well, that report doesn't do much good at all.
That's the report that I'm required to fill out, send to the state.
But again, in the Century Code, it says the State Board of Equalization shall prescribe the necessary forms. This is in the recorder's part of the Century Code. So it is the duty of the recorder to complete the listed here.
And before, I'll get to you, Commissioner, but it is the duty of the tax director and ultimately the Board of County Commissioners to comply with this. It's very clear in the Century Code.
Where's that?
And I just read it, 57010504.
I read it.
The county directors of tax equalization, city assessors. I can read it again. And I do want it to be noted for the record that this works in 52 other counties. Go ahead.
Again, we're arguing over something that it is easy to fix. It's your form. All we have to have is the form filled out. If it's a usable sale, we will move forward with that. We don't have any usable sales. So with no usable sales, with no one documenting the usable sale, we can't move forward. We don't have the ability to compel the recorder to fill out that form. You do. It's your form. You have the ability to do that. Why is this such a big deal? Why doesn't they just check usable or not usable and we'll move forward? There's no reason for this back and forth here. We're arguing about who's supposed to do it. Well, someone's got to do it, and it makes sense. It has to be done at the point of origin. The county commission certainly cannot go and scrutinize these forms and determine whether or not any of those exemptions apply. There's no way we can do that logically. How would we have that information? We don't. That's why the Century Code specifies how that information is supposed to be obtained at the time that the deed is filed. So, again, what are we to do?
I'd like to refer to Anita Wall, Chief Legal Counsel.
I agree with what Linda said earlier. These are two processes. The county recorder's duties are to record deeds so that public knows who owns what property, okay? And if there's any liens against that property. Part of what happens is she files that statement, the statement of full consideration is filed. They're supposed to be forwarded to the tax director, Linda, or the county auditor?
The tax director.
To tax director, who looks at those sales and determines whether those sales are usable or not.
Can you show me that in statute somewhere? Maybe I'm missing that. I don't see that anywhere. Can you show that to me?
I think Ryan, Commissioner.
No, that doesn't say that it has to be forwarded to the tax director.
It says that the county directors of tax equalization are responsible for compiling a record of sales of property.
Yep.
You are responsible for compiling that.
Yep.
You're responsible for analyzing that data.
Yep. I agree.
For the purpose of advising the state supervisor of assessment. Now, the purpose of the analyzing that information is, I think Linda referred to this earlier, is you look at last year's values and you look at what's on the statement of full consideration. You as a county board or tax directors compare and look to see if that is fair market value that the property was sold for. That is your responsibility.
Understood.
And I think this is not an issue with what the recorder did or not. From what it sounds like, she did perform her duties under the Century Code. So I think we want to keep this focused on what your duties are as the tax directors in analyzing the sales, providing us that information so that we can complete our duties for the State Board of Equalization.
Can I respond now? What's the first step? It's John Wakefield. What's the first step in analyzing a sale? It's to determine whether or not that sale is a valid sale and is usable. And there are the criteria set forth in the Century Code that tells you whether or not it is a usable sale. You can't go through the process that you just went through, which I agree with, until we're sure that's a usable sale. And that the only way to determine that is at the point of origin. So you're correct in what you said, but we need to know whether it's usable, because right now there's no way to go and look at a sale. Anybody can't look at a sale and say, yes, it complies or doesn't comply, because we don't know if it complies. The only person who knows if those exemptions apply are the person that's actually registering the deed.
I think, though, what's important to remember is that you look at the previous year's value. And if it was, a house was sold for $200,000 but sold for $50, that's something you would look at and say that's not a fair market value sale.
That's a question the recorder's supposed to ask before she records the deed.
That's
what it says in the Century Code.
And this is a yearly basis. We have to have sales
6.
every year. You have to have so many sales every year, or you have the ability to go back and take sales from the previous year, or you can conduct an assessment. What we're saying is, if we would someone check the box that says usable or not usable, this process will move forward. We can't make it usable or non-usable. We don't have the information to do that. So this is a useless exercise here. You can put us in jail. We still cannot glean that information. We have no way of doing that. That comes from point of origin when the deed is registered. And that's the reason the Century Code is laid out that way.
Again, what I will address is that they are, as Attorney Wald had identified, if we are talking two separate processes. The statements of full consideration and the recording of the deed are still separate from the analyzing that you have to do in order to determine if it is a usable sale for a market study. There are other factors rather than just an idea of whether they filed it on the face of the deed. that impact that, whether as the grantee is going to want to share that information if a sale price for a lake home at Lake Juanita or Juanita Lake, if the sale or the value on the assessment books is $50,000 and they sold it for $200,000, everything on that document would validate it and allow it to be recorded, and it would be considered meeting the true and full consideration requirements that were provided to the county recorder. At that point, then, how much of that was personal property that would be removed from that sale price that would allow you to acknowledge that that is not a usable sale for the market study? You're trying to compare the real property value in your books to the real property sold and valued on a deed. So they are still two separate processes. There are different considerations that are considered when you look at whether it's included in a market study compared to what's required to be filed on a deed to have it recorded.
Okay, so tell us then how we're supposed to determine whether it's a usable property. That seems to be where we're at right now. You tell us as the county commission how we're supposed to take a deed and look at it and tell us whether or not it meets any of the exemptions spelled out in the Century Code. You give us a process for that, and you and give us validation, and we'll do that. But we don't have a process for that. The process for that is already in the Century Code. We don't have any way to do it. So how would I validate a property and then have someone come up later on and say, no, this is exempt? Then it would throw the whole study into question.
You're saying this section of the Century, this is Troy, this section of the Century Code is not valid? Is that the problem? Subsection 6, personal property property classified as personal property, that makes it exempt. I mean, good night.
We'll go by your rules, but don't change the rules. The rules are written there.
It's like I was told in a previous meeting that I couldn't take the Century Code literally when it says the tax directors to do appraisals on property, and they're not qualified appraisers in the state of North Dakota. Really?
They're your forms. Either switch the forms or give us a way to comply, but we have no way to comply right now. I'm not going to make an assumption that a property is a usable sale when I don't have the information to determine that.
As county tax directors, as you've appointed yourselves, that is your job. That is your duty.
We haven't got the information from the recorder. She's not doing her job.
Correct.
But as Linda said, there are ways to analyze property.
That's fine. There might be further analyzation that needs to be done, but we haven't even gotten to step 1 yet because we're not getting the information that we need at the time of the recording.
We take the BX report, and as we take it at face value, none of these properties are usable. So that's our starting point. So we can go through every sale, and we look at the BX report, and we go to the line, is this a usable property? And none of them are usable. So where do we go from there?
I will first identify the idea behind a process. You are trying to understand how there is a process. You have someone who is certified as an assessor, who has an understanding of arm's length transactions. Whether you think you are getting the appropriate information or not from your recorder, still as the county commission or as the county tax director, you would be responsible to compile that information. And an individual who is certified as an assessor would be able to identify information for you if it's considered an arm's length transaction, and you would still be able to meet those requirements. Whether the commissioner at this level will feel the need to compel as you address the county recorder, we'll have to look into that into the future. In the response, as a response to Commissioner Olson, in his use of the word appraisal, and often trying to use to intimidate or probably set aside the idea of the difference between assessors and appraisers. The statute identifies that if there are not enough sales that for the productivity study, the county director of tax equalization or a city assessor, as the case may be, in cooperation with the state supervisor of assessments or that person's assistants, shall make appraisals. Appraisals are often used as a word opposite assessments. There is not anything in the Century Code then that defines it. It must be an appraiser. It is identifying that those individuals from the city, the county, and the state supervisor of assessments or that person's assistants shall make assessments and appraisals of properties to address that market value. So no one was mandated to hire an appraiser to do that. It is identified as an appraisal, as often appraisals and assessments are used just as the word value is used in statute, and they often reflect the same thing. So it's not the requirement that someone is going to have an appraiser to complete that if you are short the sales. It is identifying that you shall make appraisals, and those would be then supplemented to a sales ratio study for your commercial, especially where you felt that you did not have enough transactions.
I have one question, John Wakefield. On the BX, the treasurer's BX report, are all the line items mandatory on that report? And if not, why are they on there? Why do you ask the question of the recorder, is this a usable sale? If it doesn't matter, if she doesn't have to fill it out, or he or she doesn't have to fill it out, why did you include that on a form supplied by the state? If it doesn't mean anything, it shouldn't be on there. So evidently, the inclusion of that question on the recorder's BX form must mean something to somebody. And so if you're telling us it doesn't mean anything, then take it off there. But you're the people that supplied that form, not us. So we're just trying to comply here, but we can't comply because we can't make that judgment.
Linda, may I ask, who typically fills out that usable sale?
Usable sales are reviewed and analyzed by the county director of tax equalization or a city assessor for the major cities.
Okay, thank you. So recorders have never had that duty to determine whether a sale is usable or not, just to file the statement of full consideration.
They put it in the wrong place in the century code?
Have you looked at the form? The form says recorder's BX report.
Yes.
It doesn't say tax director's BX report.
Excuse me, this is Linda. I will say that that form no longer exists. So the form, no.
That's convenient. What, yesterday?
But we're looking at 2016.
The form is the information is provided in the manner of an upload that identifies what information is to be shared. How you are garnering that information and the idea that it should be someone with assessment knowledge is making the determination. It should not be the county recorder.
But we're looking at the 2016 data. This is Ron Dahl. And on the 2016 data, it's the Schedule BX that has to be filled out. And it clearly says report of the county recorder. And it's a 2-page report, and there's a place for a signature on the back. Who else would sign it besides the county recorder?
Kelly Vincent, if I may speak to that, our program automatically generated those forms because obviously the documents were recorded in our office, and that information is pulled from our forms. Ron, can I see the back page? That one right there. It is my understanding that these questions on the back of the BX form, these are to be answered and filled out by the county tax director. These questions here are what determine whether that sale is to be usable or not in the sales ratio study.
This is a state form, right? I mean, it says right at the bottom, 24815. I assume that's a state number. It's a 2-page form from the state. And the front of the form, again, I keep repeating myself, it says it's reported the county recorder, and it's a place for signing page 2 of it.
What, if I may speak again, the certificate that goes with those forms on the front of it says, you know, let's say there's 10 deeds, or a total of 13 deeds recorded, 3 of them were exempt, 10 are to be determined whether to be used or not. And those are the forms that go with that certificate, and that's what's given to the tax director for them to determine. After they answer these questions on the back of that form, they then determine whether it is to be used or not.
After you answer those questions.
I do not answer these questions.
What you should.
Property owned or used by public utilities, property classified as personal property, for sale, mortgage foreclosure. I just want to state for the record, 95% of the deeds that come into my office come from law firms. They come in the mail. I don't have the individual standing in front of me. These aren't questions that I would ever ask them. There's 52 other recorders in the state of North Dakota that do it the same way I do. It's the way that we are instructed by the state to do.
I'm going to ask one question and make one statement before we close the hearing. As tax directors, as you've appointed yourself, do you plan on analyzing the sales for purposes of equalizing property in Griggs County? Simple yes or no. Anybody can answer on behalf of the commission.
Well,
is it your intention to actually analyze sales to equalize property?
I can't answer on behalf of the commission, because we haven't voted on it. So I can only answer as an individual. But as an individual, if I do get these reports that are correctly signed, I will analyze them. And the other commissioners can speak on their opinion, and then later we'll vote for it, and I may be the minority vote.
And I want to be noted that Linda Ledbetter, the State Supervisor of Assessments, has noted other remedies for that, for analyzing those sales, so,
And
analyzing values.
And Commissioner, I just want to make a note that since all of the commissioners are here, you are a quorum.
Mhm.
So it is an open record meeting. It is a meeting of the county commissioners, and so you
Absolutely.
are here as county commissioners.
Absolutely.
Right, but the decision, John Wakefield, the statements that we make are that of the individual. We don't, unless we voted on a statement amongst ourselves, the 5 members, we can't make a statement as a county commission. What we're talking here is discussion, not a judgment of the county commission, because I could have an opinion on this that might differ from the other county commissioners. The only way that it can be a decision of the county commission is for everybody to vote on it. Now back to Ryan's question here. Could you read that one more time? Ask the question one more time.
As tax directors, do you plan on analyzing, is your intention to analyze sales for the purpose of equalizing property in Griggs County?
The answer is redundant because we have already done that. We have, as the Tax Equalization Board, we have already analyzed properties in Griggs County for the purpose of equalization. That was done. What you're talking about is your equalization, not ours. The township, the city, and the county equalization meetings are done, over with. We have equalized our properties. You are now trying to equalize the properties of the state. So the information that you need lies within Griggs County. We're willing to give it to you, but we have to make sure that we give you correct information. And until we can make sure it's a usable sale, we can't give you correct information.
I do have one question. So as the county board of tax equalization, may I ask what you use to determine whether the property within the county, within the taxing districts, was equalized?
I can answer that. From my view of the equalization was using data that was gleaned prior to our Board of Equalization, because of course it goes at the township level first. So if, in my understanding, if there has been no objections raised at the township level or the city level, and no objections raised at the county level, evidently the prior equalization that has been done and maintained through the system is valid, because the point of equalization is to make sure that all taxpayers are receiving a fair break. They're all paying the same. And what tells you if that's not happening is someone coming and complaining that their taxes are too high, or someone coming and complaining that somebody else's taxes are too low. So the fact that we went through the equalization process and didn't have any objections tells me that the equalization process has been done correctly.
So you are of the opinion that each township has been equalized within the county, so that one township hasn't been assessed at a higher value than another township?
That's my opinion.
And you've done that with the cities too? You've compared sales in the cities?
That's my opinion.
That's your opinion. That's what
My opinion has
I'm
been
saying.
equalized. That's correct. Because, and only based on the fact that no one is objecting to the process. And really, the process of equalization is very subjective. You can read into it or whatever you want. There's no hard facts. You put column A and column B and column C and you come up with an answer. It's very subjective, as you well know. So the only response, as we are delegates of the citizens of Griggs County. After all, our job, your job, everybody's job is to make sure that the citizens of Griggs County and the citizens of the state are happy with the way their government's being run and happy with the amount of money that they're contributing to that government. No better gauge of that than to, in an open forum, let people complain about how much money they're spending, being taxed. And when no one complains, evidently the system is running correctly.
So with that, are there any other comments from staff, Linda, Joe, Keith? At its next meeting, I'll be informing the State Board of Equalization as to what took place here today. I'll be also notifying you within the next 30 days, the County Commission, as to the action that will be taken as a result of this meeting, and then you'll have 10 days to respond to that. As we close, I do want it to be noted for those here that since this statute allowing for this hearing was put into place in 1965, this is the first time I think we've had to use it. All 52 other counties have been able to do this process and comply.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and historically, Griggs County. So this is not a common occurrence. I want you to know that. This is not something we do or have had to do in the past. So I just wanted that to be known for the record. And appreciate everybody coming here today, and you will be hearing from us as far as any next steps that need to be taken. Thank you. That concludes the hearing.
Well, I have a question. Can I ask a question before we start? Before we're done?
One question.
Am I misinterpreting the statute?
In my opinion, yes. I think you're...
Subsection 6, that doesn't exist? It is there. I mean, come on. Doesn't the recorder need to do what it...
I think the thing is we can agree to disagree on what the Century Code requires of you.
It's written in English.
I don't think you can read the Century Code in a vacuum, though. I've been doing this for 30 years. No.
Let me.
So anyways.
All the 52 other counties that comply, that also don't comply with this statute, I would venture to guess that that information is less than accurate, because that is the time when you have the attention of the grantee to answer those questions. It doesn't make any sense to do it at another point in time.
In conclusion, I think we have legislators in the room here. The code is written as such for compliance, and it is written as such because information is needed and tax equalization is important. If you have a problem with that and the way the code is written,
I don't.
We can sure work together for the next legislative session, but we need compliance with the
I think
law
the
as it
code is fine.
I'm going to close the hearing as it is. Thank you.
I do want to mention that after you have 10 days after a 30-day or notice or decision comes out to appeal this to the State Board of Equalization. That meeting is August 8th in Bismarck, and so.
So if we check the box that these are user properties and send you the BX report in a summary fashion, we're in compliance.
Yeah.
In the method and the forms as prescribed by the State Tax Commission. Yes.
And what is that method and form?
That has been provided. There is an upload document that has been provided. There are some counties that have that available through their pro members, but it is that.
And Linda's been to your meetings to explain that.
So you give us permission then to declare all these sales usable?
That's your determination.
That's
in your
not
own-
us to make a call
That's for
on.
you to analyze those sales.
Therein lies the problem. And our analyzation is, that's the end of it then. We just say, yes, they're usable, we send them in, and it's not. Even though we know that it's not accurate. But we can do that. That's what you're forcing us to do. You're forcing us to make a determination that we don't have the information to make that determination.
And the meeting is closed.
It's very disrespectful.
Yeah. Sorry.